Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 121. It's very difficult to have any kind of romantic feelings for a movie where you know exactly what's going to happen in the first 5 minutes. Joe Swansberg.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my indie film hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by VideoBlocks. Now, VideoBlocks is a subscription-based stock media company that gives you unlimited access to premium stock footage everyone could afford. If you're looking for like extra exterior shots or things that you might want to incorporate into any of your projects, whether that be a narrative, documentary, music videos, commercials, these guys got you covered. They've got unlimited daily downloads from a library of over 115,000 HD video clips, as well as a huge selection of After Effects templates for like opening credits, motion graphics, titles, company logos, as well as motion backgrounds as well. It's pretty amazing. And on average, subscribers pay less than $1 per download in a course of a year. And the content does not get stale. They're constantly adding new content to the library every month. So it keeps it very, very fresh, and you always have something new to look forward to. And everything you download is 100% royalty free. Even if your subscription is canceled, you have unrestricted usage rights for anything you want to do, including personal projects and commercial projects. And you keep whatever you download and maintain the usage rights forever. Now, VideoBlocks is offering The Tribe a yearly subscription for $99. That's $50 off the usual price tag, just for you guys, just for The Tribe. That's less than $10 a month. So to get this deal, just head over to videoblocks.com/hustle. That's VideoBlocks, VIDEO blocks.com/hustle for this exclusive offer. Don't forget to head over to filmfestivaltips.com to download my free guide, and I'll show you how I was able to get into over 600 international film festivals for either cheap or free. So, guys, I have some exciting news I wanted to give you guys. I've been teasing you guys about this for a while, but I wanted to let you guys know what's going on. I am going to be at Sundance and at Slamdance specifically, not with Miss This Meg. We did not get into either festival, but that's okay. It's all good. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But I was invited to speak at Slamdance by Blackmagic Design, the makers of DaVinci Resolve, which is DaVinci Resolve, and the camera that I shot on, the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 2.5. They got wind of This Is Meg and what I was able to do with This Is Meg, the image quality and everything I was able to do within not only the 2.5 camera, but also that I edited the entire movie in Blackmagic and in DaVinci Resolve, and I also color graded it, and I used the whole, basically, almost everything that Blackmagic has to offer to create the workflow for This Is Meg. So they invited me to come and talk about how I was able to create the workflow, what my experiences were, and so on. And it's going to be on Saturday, January 21st, from 2:30 to 4:30. At the Filmmaker Lounge at Treasure Mountain Inn. If you're at Sundance or at Slamdance during that time, head on over, man. Take a look and sit down on a couple workshops. I'll be joined by another filmmaker, a Slamdance Grand Jury Award winner, Andrew McPhillips, who's going to talk about his experience on his new movie, The Doll, on how he shot with the Ursa Mini, edited in DaVinci, and also color graded it as well. And then after the whole event, guys, there's going to be a nice little mixer between 5 and 7 where you can get drinks, kind of a little bit of a happy hour, and then you could ask more questions from us and so on. So it's going to be a really fun event. I cannot wait to share it with you guys. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to record it and share it with everybody, not only in the Indie Film Syndicate, but also on, at least clips of it on YouTube and for the rest of the tribe, because I know Blackmagic wants to be using it for educational purposes moving forward as well. So wanted to let you guys know that. All this is happening because I started doing something. I started and I got that engine rolling, and all of a sudden certain things start popping up, opportunities start popping up. Why? Because you actually I got off my ass and did something about it. And that's something that you guys need to do. Just set things in motion and you'll be amazed at what the universe sends your way. And like I said, I'm super, super excited to be partnering with Black Magic on this little event. And we'll see where it all goes in the future. But I'm really, really excited. And I hope I can see you guys there again. January 21st, 2:30 to 4:30 p.m. at the Filmmaker Lounge at Treasure Mountain Inn. And I'll put all that information in the show notes, of course, at indiefilmhustle.com/121. And I'll talk more about that as we get closer to the event. Now, I will also be doing some other very cool things at Sundance in regards to the podcast, possible some very cool interviews, live broadcast, video, all sorts of cool stuff. I'm still working out the details. You will know about it before I head out to Sundance. I promise you. So, guys, I'm super excited about today's guest, Joshua Caldwell, man. I mean, Josh is, I call him my brother in arms, my brother in indie film arms, because, as I was interviewing him for the show, I just started realizing everything he was saying was like, oh my God, this is like, he's basically saying a lot of the stuff I've been preaching for a while now, but he's put a lot of it in practice. He's made now 3 feature films, and one specifically that we're going to talk heavily about in this episode is The Layover, or actually just Layover. Layover was made for $6,000, and he shot it on a DSLR. You know how I feel about DSLRs, but I'm coming around. Again, I always say that DSLRs are good if you know what you're doing and if you can shoot it properly. And my man knew what he was doing, because I saw the trailer for it and it looks really, really good. He really talks a lot about really guerrilla stuff. He's stealing every shot you could imagine. I mean, he basically shot all around LA, went into the highest profile locations and just stole shots. He actually went to LAX, shot in LAX, went on a plane, shot on a plane. I mean, it was a pretty great story, and it just shows you that you can go out and do it, and you don't need $1 million or $500,000 or anything to go make your movie. He did it. He proved it himself, and he's just like, you know what? This is the movie I wanted to make. And by the way, it's a French language. He's not French. He doesn't speak French, but a French language indie film, basically done for $6,000. No action. I'm not sure about sex, but I don't think there's any sex in it either. And it's just basically a romp one night throughout LA. It's pretty awesome. I can't express to you enough how awesome it was to talk to Josh. And I really was excited to get him on the show, and then also to get this information out to you guys. So if you guys are going to make a feature film in the next year or two, or even thinking about making a feature film, you've got to listen to this podcast. It will change the way you look at movies and how to make movies, especially in today's world, and the empowerment that you will have. Which, again, is what I've been preaching all this time with what I've done with This Is Meg, what I'm going to be doing with my future projects coming up in 2017, and so on. And I just want to give you guys the freedom to just go and shoot. And Josh really lays out a great battle plan, a blueprint on how he did it with Layover. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear his story, his antidotes, and all the cool stuff that he's been doing over the last few years. And he also have a common inspirational movie that kind of started us off on this path, which is For Lovers Only. I've talked about this movie by the Polish brothers many times on the show before, and I will put a link in the show notes to the podcast with Michael Polish, where we discuss in depth how they went and shot for Lovers Only, which was basically done on a zero budget. And a lot of those techniques that they were using back then, which is 2010, something like that, 2011, is a lot of stuff that Josh used in this movie and I used in This Is Meg. So without any further ado, I'm not going to talk anymore, guys. I want you guys to hear this interview. Really get ready to listen up and listen to this many, many times, because it's very valuable information. Enjoy my conversation with Josh Caldwell. I'd like to welcome to the show Joshua Caldwell.
Caldwell. There
Caldwell.
you go.
I got it, man. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for reaching out, man. And so we were talking a little bit off air before we started, and you actually remember. I guess you remembered my name from years ago on another project I did, right?
It's a whole decade ago, I think, at this point.
Stop it, man! You're making me feel old, bro.
How do you think I feel?
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. So yeah, you apparently you're one of the people who bought Broken back in the day.
Well, I did I buy it? I'm trying to remember. I didn't steal it. That's for sure, but I saw it.
It's fine. You bootlegged it. It's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw it. I think because it was available at some point. But yeah, no, I remember. It was kind of one of those things when the DVX 100A was coming out, the Canon XL2 was coming out, and everyone was like 24p was the huge thing, but like people hadn't really used it to make, in generous terms, a decent looking movie, right. Something really cinematic. And so I think I just remember you guys blowing up and sort of, reading about it and reading about it's like the process behind it. And you guys had the whole website with like, here's how we did the effects and here's how we did the color correction. Here's how we did all this. And it was just like, at that time, I mean, the people that are sort of into filmmaking now don't realize like how little information there was, even 10 years ago. And so, I mean, I've talked about that before, but this idea of like, you and I don't know how old you are, but you and I are like products
we're similar vintages.
We're similar. We're in the same decade range, I guess.
Yes.
But it's like how even at the early stages of the internet, there still wasn't like a ton of info. And so you really had to like suss out like, online, like how people were doing things. Like I've said, I'd be watching like the behind the scenes on Magnolia back in like 2000 and seeing a dolly and being like a Fisher dolly and being like, what is that thing? Like, mind blown.
Where do you get one of those?
Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. Or like, what is that for? Like, I don't know what that's for, or seeing a shot in a movie and trying to understand like, is that a zoom or is that a dolly or is that a combo of both? Or like, how did they get all this walking stuff so smooth? And you don't know what a Steadicam is, and then you discover, there's a thing called a glide cam that you could use with your DVX or your GL2 or whatever you're using. And suddenly but you're sussing all this out. And I just remember like you guys like had put up, you'd taken this film, you'd made this film, that was very well received, but then you would also gone that step further of putting up this like wealth of information in terms of how you did it. And that just being very like a really cool thing in a very, very small lake of film technique and information at that time.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Yeah. When I did that movie, I there was nothing. Like I looked everywhere. Yeah. I looked everywhere and I was like, well, I don't think this is
kids today's have it so easy.
Oh, these kids, they don't know.
These kids,
they can shoot on their iPhone. The iPhone's better quality than what that
I know, right? Like but, people to this day, I did a short in college that I won an MTV Movie Award for called The Beautiful Lie, that was shot on the XL2, and people are like, "Oh, can I see it?" I'm like, "No."
Yeah, no, that's no.
I don't even know if I can get it for you to see it because it was like SD and it's on a tape somewhere, and you're just like, don't worry about it.
Just let it go. Just let it go.
Yeah.
So, man, how'd you get into the industry in the first place?
I started making movies in high school. And we just had a cool program where we had like Avid systems and digital cameras, and we were able to like edit. And this is like 2001, 2001 that we had this. And so I sort of just took advantage of it. It's something that I kind of found myself really loving. And, I had grown up like, seeing movies with my dad and playing, seeing Batman and then coming back and playing Batman and getting the neighborhoods get together and sort of play acting. Or building worlds with like Legos or Playmobil and sort of like creating, narratives and stories and sort of acting that out, but not knowing what a director did or a writer did or a cinematographer or any of that. Unlike kids these days, just know everything. And so, and then in high school, I discovered that they had this program, and it was sort of being able to do this program from a learning perspective, but then we had our ASB officers, Associated Student Body Officers, would make parody movies in order to sort of like, introduce the new homecoming theme or something like that. And I had a friend that did it. And so I started hanging out with him and sort of pitching ideas. And eventually I took over directing these things. And we did like, we did a Usual Suspects ripoff. And these weren't like parodies. Like sometimes some of them were serious. You know, they weren't like all comedy, but I did like Usual Suspects rip off. We did like a Snatch heist movie. I did a soap opera. And then my big finale was we did an hour-long Star Wars movie.
Oh, wow.
So it was like really great because we had the tools available to, you know, talking about not having this info, like, you know, back in 2002, trying to figure out how to make lightsabers work do lightsabers on screen in After Effects. It was like, you know, and then I did one way and then I discovered the way that you could actually do it where you could get it to flare out. And I was like, well, it's too late now to make it better. It like looks like a little toothpick that you're swinging around. And so, right. You know, but just trying to discover that and using like 3D Max and like, you know, getting free downloads of spaceships that people had built in 3D Max and then animating that, you know, and just all that kind of stuff. But the idea was you always had, you know, you had a deadline, and we showed these at school assemblies. So like you were somewhat censored. You couldn't do whatever you wanted, but you were expected to make 1,300 kids happy, you know? And so It was like a really great sort of formative experience at a very young age to sort of know that we had a deadline, we had no money, and we had to find a way to make it work. And so that's where a lot of my kind of approach was born out of. Which leads
us to, I guess, you did a handful of shorts, obviously, prior to your first feature, which kind of got your feet wet and you learned a little bit of the tools. But on your first feature, which you made for 6,000, if I read correctly?
6,000, yeah, 6,000.
Layover. Can you tell us a little bit about that first feature?
Yeah, it was. You know, it's the story of a young French woman who is traveling from Paris to Singapore to visit her boyfriend, and she is sort of expecting him to propose once she gets there. And she has a unexpected layover in Los Angeles. Her connecting flight is canceled until the following morning. And so she's stuck here for 12 hours. She has a friend here, calls her up, they go out. And that sort of starts this night of sort of self-reflection and discovery and sort of consideration about, you know, sort of whether the life she's flying to is the life that she wants. And sort of in an interesting way, she's given a pause button for 12 hours to sort of just take a breather and think about it. And that's kind of what the show, you know, and it's a traveling movie. We travel throughout the city of LA. You know, we're all over the city. I'm
assuming, and you paid for permits and everything, right?
No, not at all. Totally. We had the trailers and all that stuff following. No, it was a total guerrilla. I mean, shot on the 5D, you know, everything was stolen. We didn't permit anything, but it was an attempt. And the 6,000 was just, that was the money we had. So we made it work, but we paid our actors. Mm-hmm. You know, we had a small crew. Like we get, you know, online, if you read some of the articles on like No Film School, you get a lot of people who've never made a movie before writing back and being like, oh, you didn't make it for $6,000, or how'd you do this? And how'd you do this? And it's just like, you know, one, well, go make a movie yourself before you talk. But two, like there are creative ways of doing it. And you just have to think about it. Like they would make assumptions that were clearly incorrect.
Right.
You know?
I hear it all the time. The time. And people just always wanted like, well, how did Robert Rodriguez really make the movie for 7,000? I'm like, well, the movie he showed his agent was made for 7,000. The one that we saw was made for 1.2 million.
Right. Yeah.
After we did everything.
Exactly. And so, but you know, it's like, it's possible. It's possible nowadays,
absolutely.
Certainly. And it was just one of those things where, you know, we just did a very limited crew. There's 4 people the whole time, and we didn't pay the crew, but they got credit, and we shot on weekends, so nobody really cared. If they didn't really want to do it, they didn't have to be there. Like it wasn't this thing where we had 30 people standing around and we weren't paying them. You know, it was which is what people usually do, and I have done on shorts. You know, where you're like, well, I don't have the money, volunteer, and it's just like, you know, so Layover was an attempt to sort of do an indie movie for very low budget that was different than what you were seeing made, which was limited characters and like limited locations, like 1 to 3 locations, but they would have the crew. Mm-hmm. And I just got to the point where I was like, well, the crew is not what's up on screen. The crew is not helping me put something up on screen. So having made these shorts and little things with the 5D where I was running around town for no money and trying to shoot stuff and expected to turn in high quality work, I was like, is this possible on a feature level? Could I make a feature this way? Mm-hmm. And so I wrote a movie designed to be accomplished at that budget, for no money. I brought everything I had, spent 14 years learning as a do-it-yourself filmmaker to the table. I brought my experience as a shooter to the table, and we really kind of went for it. And it turned out pretty well. I mean, it's a French language movie. I don't speak French, but we decided to challenge ourselves in that way. And it was also coming in a time in my life where I was like, I'd been writing features and trying to get features made, and you kept going like, $300,000 for the type of movie I want to make, probably not going to get it. I don't want to spend time like looking for money. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of kept boiling down to me going, all right, I'm about to turn 30. I want to shoot a feature. So what's the feature I can shoot? And if the feature I can shoot is Layover for $6,000, then that's the feature I'm going to make. And, and it wasn't even a gamble because like the money was like a non-issue. Like it wasn't like, I have this French language indie drama with no stars and I'm spending $1 million to do it and I'm never going to make that money back. It was really so low risk that we never felt ever that we were like, oh, we can't get this done or this isn't going to work or it's not going to be as good as it can be. I mean, we shot on weekends. We had time in between the shooting days to figure it out and think about it, which is a process I brought to another film I did, Negative, more recently, but that had a significantly higher budget, but we still brought the same approach, which was it was all in service of turning around the best movie that we could, which really involved getting the best performances that we could. And so everything about the film was shaped to give us the most time on set to get the best performances possible. And so we barely lit. We shot the 5D at like 32, 6400 ISO, and that allowed us to basically show up light in 30 minutes and spend 8 hours shooting the takes and get us really, really, really great performances. And so, the thing that I say is like, everybody's sort of always thinking about their first feature and worried about their first feature. And I'm like, well, it's just a feature. Like it's going to be good or it's going to be bad. And the thing is, though, is nobody's going to give you a shot until you just do that first feature. And really for me, like I made great shorts. I have a short that I'm like incredibly proud of called Dig. And I spent like $40,000 to make it. And it's a period drama. And it's got Mark Margolis in it from Breaking Bad. And it's like really, really, really great. Nobody cares.
No one cares, man.
No one cares. I got nothing off of it.
I did the same thing.
Nothing off of it. And the second I make a $6,000 French language, no stars, indie drama, I get offers for the next 3 years off the same film.
Now, first of all, I want you to. I just want to say, man, preach on, brother, preach on, because I mean, I can't explain to you how much, and the listeners know. You've said pretty much verbatim about at least 3 or 4 podcasts that I've talked about all those topics about backing into your budget. Doing something low for your first one so you can just experiment and don't put pressure on it. It's not going to be a home run out the park. You're not going to get a deal with go to Sundance, get a deal.
And it could be.
It could. No, you could, but that's a lottery ticket.
It could, but don't worry about it. Yeah, exactly. It's a lottery ticket. And there's very few people that can.
That happens. So just do the best work you can, and that's all you can do within the parameters that you have. And that's exactly what you did. So what was the biggest thing you learned on shooting Layover?
So the biggest thing I learned shooting Layover is that audiences, so really it's a very technical thing, but it's a technical thing that leads into everything else, which is that audiences do not care about the image insofar as the way that DPs care about the image. And what I mean by that is that as long as it looks decent, audiences do not care. As long as the performances are great. If you have a beautiful looking movie and the performances suck because it took forever to get those beautiful shots, audiences will not care about your movie. They will not care. Performance and attachment to the story triumphs over everything else. And so in a way that gives you a huge amount of freedom. And I talk a lot about this now. These new cameras, like Canon cameras specifically, and using them at very high ISOs, which allows me to step into locations and not light and not spend time lighting shots and instead spend time getting performance. Because I've said this before on Layover, And a lot of people watch Layover and they think it's very beautiful, because I think it's a beautiful film because, you use the natural city lights in LA and you shoot at 6400 ISO, it's going to look amazing. But I never once had an audience member watching Layover say, I really enjoyed your movie, until I saw the shot with some noise in it, and it ruined it for me. Yet I have always had people say in some other projects I've done that'll remain nameless that, we spent a lot of time lighting and we didn't have time for performance, and it was not set up in a way to succeed performance wise. People do not care about it because the performances aren't great. When you have 3 takes, you're not going to get great stuff unless you're using, unless you got freaking like huge A-list actors in it and they know what they're doing,
right.
And even then. But it really is like a thing where I took from Layover something that I now applied to everything that I have control over, which is like, we are not going to spend 3 hours lighting this shot or this scene. Like I'm gonna ask you to shoot above 3200 ISO, which most DPs don't want to do. And I'm going to ask you to trust me that it's going to be okay, because I've spent 2 years doing it and doing it with great effect. And so to me, what I took from that was, everybody really loves the performances in Layover. And that was because we were in a place where we could play and we could try things and we could do things differently, and we could spend the time to get the good performances and get the story right, rather than worrying about, is this lit as perfectly as it needs to be? And guess what? At the end of the day, people still love the cinematography in Layover.
Right.
It's not like, it looks like shit and you can't, clearly it looks terrible, but the performances are great. It's like, it still looks beautiful. It's really about, Mark Polish and I talk a lot about this now, because he and I have been sort of in the same vein.
Mike's
saying that
Mike's a friend of the show. Yes, I know Mike. He's awesome.
Mark, his brother.
Oh, Mark. You're talking Mark. I know Michael.
Michael's great too. But Mark and I have been talking, and it's sort of the idea of like, framing is almost more important than lighting.
Yep.
And so in that respect, framing doesn't take time. Like, framing's discovery. Framing's like, so
especially if you're shooting
even
if you're shooting it at a higher resolution, you can always reframe in post as well.
Exactly. And it gives you that freedom. And so, like, I took from Layover this idea that, wow, like, we can go out in the street and go out into these locations that we've never seen before with a minimal light kit or a non-existent light kit and shoot really, really great material that people aren't going to believe we got. And so that to me is what I've taken from it, and really have pushed DPs I've worked with now and pushed myself as a DP, to sort of really take that to the next level. And I think that's what I'm most excited about. What I'm most excited about in terms of like camera technology is low light sensitivity, not resolution.
Right, absolutely. And the cameras now they're getting sick. It's really
they're getting sick. They're ridiculous. I mean, parts of Negative were shot on this Canon ME20 that shoots up to 4 million ISO. And we didn't shoot at that because it's unusable. But we shot a big sequence in Negative, which is the shootout sequence in the middle of the desert. We shot that at 25,000 and 100,000 ISO. And you see the stars in the night sky, and we were able to light with I had 2 people up there with a small light kit, like you lighting huge swaths of desert because these cameras are just so sensitive. And so it gives you a lot of freedom to move fast, move quickly, work with a small crew, get a lot of material, spend a lot of time getting like great takes and I'd rather have 20 great takes I've got to choose from in the edit than one, And so that's what it's about. It's really about, how do I, on an indie budget, build in the opportunity to do sort of David Fincher, Michael Mann style takes, not 100 of them, but a lot.
Oh, but look at Michael Mann.
Give us freedom.
But look at what Michael Mann did. I mean, he was the one starting. I think he was one of the first guys, him and Fincher, to use the Viper, because it was one of the first cameras to actually see at night, and you can actually see more than film could see. With Collateral, I mean, that movie.
Yep.
I think he went a little too far in Miami Vice, personally, but it was a little grainy.
We'll agree to disagree on that one, but
it was a little grainy. It was just a little grainy. That's all.
Yeah, but I think this is a whole side conversation. But what I like about Michael Mann is I think he's pushing form. The thing that's funny to me about Michael Mann in terms of people's like expectations of him as a filmmaker, because they know him from Heat and they know him like for this really great narrative stuff. I think like Michael at heart is like an arty filmmaker. Like, he's like so interested in the arty aspect of it, and you see it now in his movies because he's got the freedom to play with it. And like, you're either going to like it or you're not. But like, it's so much more about like feeling and mood and like that kind of stuff than it is about like a narrative thread. Like the narrative thread is almost like secondary in an interesting way. But anyway, but back to, so I mean, everybody's sort of talking about this like resolution game. And I'm like, well, you got to think about like how that hurts you, because like shooting at high resolutions means you got to pay a lot of money for storage. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of like heavy workflow. It's not something you can probably do on your home computer to color at 8K. And so it creates a lot of issues for you down the line that you're going to have to make sure you've got the money for in order to accomplish it. And 8K doesn't make your movie better.
No.
But I think that low light sensitivity on cameras can make your movie better, because what it can do is it can simplify and limit the amount of time you need to spend lighting, which means you can now spend more of that time shooting. And that's what's going to make your movie better, is to give you more material to shoot, and to have in the edit room than having 1-2 takes.
Now, the second movie you made was Be Somebody. How'd you get that off the ground?
That was just a for-hire thing, honestly.
Oh, really?
I mean, that came out of, that was something where they were looking for a director, and they had seen Layover. They really liked Layover. And I had also come off of doing a series called South Beach, which was on Hulu. Mm-hmm. And so Be Somebody kind of came out. It's one of those for-hire things that kind of comes out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, this is a really interesting story. Like, I can see myself doing this, and it was something that was like an opportunity at the time. And so I went for it. And I sort of was intrigued by the idea of sort of taking this notion of like Roman holiday and mm-hmm. sort of, and updating it, but shooting it in like a way that really spoke to me, and sort of was my approach to it, as opposed to, somebody else's. And so I was also intrigued by getting into this like digital world, this kind of world of digital features and influencer movies, and sort of seeing if that was something that, would lend itself to my approach.
Yeah. What effect did Matthew's audience have on the financing of the film and also of the selling of the film?
I mean, financing was all of it. It was all him. I mean, it was certainly like the impact of having 20 million very rabid followers, so possibly buying into that movie was them determining this is worth the risk. And then I know for a fact on Paramount's side, the reason why Paramount came in and agreed to, license and release the movie was an experiment as well, to see like, oh, is this something real? This kid's got so many followers. Is it something we can translate into sales? I don't actually know the answer on how that worked out. But I think it did. I think it did pretty well.
Theatrical. I mean, I'm sure they did pretty well on VOD and that.
Yeah. I mean, we did like a limited 10-week or 10-day theatrical, for like a week. Mm-hmm. But now it's on Netflix, it's on iTunes, it's on Amazon. And so it seemed to get, I think that I've had friends of mine watch it, and they're like, it's good. I get it. And I'm like, but I think it's like kind of directed at a very specific audience. Mm-hmm. But again, like to me, it was this idea of again, trying to experiment and try things. And it's like, oh, how does this look if I have more money? But at the same time, like one of my issues with that movie was I was given 12 days to shoot. Like we shot that movie in 12 days, and
Jesus.
I'm like,
and I saw from the trailer alone, you bounced around a lot. It wasn't like you just shot that in your room.
Bringing that approach, which is say, here's how we can sort of expand the scope a bit. But it was one of those things where I just, now I feel like and your listeners got to know this. Like, here's the thing, like as a director, we spend so little time actually directing. We're either editing or we're writing or we're pre-production, but like we spend very, very little time on set directing and having that experience. So the more that you can do it, the better off you're going to be. I think about it like, okay, like I did, Layover or Negative was like a 38-day shoot, and Be Somebody was a 12-day shoot. And then I've just done I just did a short film that was a 3-day shoot, and I just did a pilot, which was a 2-day shoot. So like, what is that? 55 days. Mm-hmm. So out of 365 days, I've spent 55 of them on set directing.
And the rest prepping for those days.
Yeah.
Or editing those days, right?
Yeah, but there's not a huge learning until you're on set trying to figure out how to capture all this. Mm-hmm. So getting on set and having that experience and having to solve problems and figure things out is probably one of the best things you can do to learn how to do all this stuff. And that's why, like, making Layover, I didn't do this at 22 before I'd done anything else. I did it after 14 years of just like do it yourself filmmaking and trying to figure out and going, oh, this works, this doesn't. Like, Layover is possible because when I had a job working as an exec for Anthony Zeiker, who created CSI, I was involved in digital then, and I didn't know much about digital and YouTube and all this stuff, but like clearly you have no money. So it's like, how do you shoot stuff for cheap in digital? And so all of that came out of an experience of all these things like, wow, you have cameras that can shoot in low light. You can go out on the street and capture stuff without having to like, because I knew from experience with the Red that you can't really do that. Mm-hmm. And so all these things started to add up, but they all added up because I was out there doing it and testing and trying things and shooting narrative and seeing what worked and what didn't. And so now it really is like, Be Somebody was like sort of going, okay, I don't understand how I have a far higher budget than I do on negative, and yet I'm only given 12 days. And yet on negative, I can stretch it out to 38, and then to me, I go, well, what's the better movie? Mm-hmm. For me, it's negative, in a certain way. But I think that's because I created a production model that, as I mentioned, gives me more time to get greater scope, and better performances for less money. And so now the learning is, well, here's where the waste is. Here's how I can change this. Here's where you need it and where you don't need it, and sort of starting to feel out, okay, now how do I take this low budget model of like me and two people shooting a movie and having it look really good? How do I apply this to things with bigger budgets? How do I apply these things where I have unions? How do I apply these things where I have like, whatever? And so it's become like now I'm trying to experiment with the whole form of production, the whole model of production, because, one of the things that I find kind of frustrating is this idea, what they've done in sort of the low budget indie world is they've gone, well, let's take the same production model of a 10, 20, 40, $100 million movie.
Right.
And apply it down to, $1 million budget. And guess what you lose? You lose days. Mm-hmm. Obviously you lose crew. You don't have the same size crew in a $100 million movie, but you cut down to like, you still have a lot of crew. You still have a lot of trucks. You still have a lot of trailers. You still have a lot of this, that, and the other thing. But what you really lose is days. Mm-hmm. And that is not really cool with me.
Right, because that doesn't allow you to get the performances you need and to tell the story that you were trying to tell.
Yeah, I just had this discussion with a producer on something, and I was given a bunch of reasons why one location was better than the other, and I said, all of your reasons are production related. They have nothing to do with creative. Mm-hmm. And so I'm taking a less creative location, to adjust for production rather than production adjusting for creative. And what I need is sort of the power to control both, mm-hmm. which is where I'm trying to get to. Because when I can do that, then I can do stuff like negative, where I have 38 days,
Yeah, that's a pretty bulky indie film schedule, without question.
Well, listen, they weren't like 38 full 12-hour days,
Right.
But the idea was to really not – the idea was we have so little money, so let's pretend we have none, mm-hmm. which means let's spread it out. Like, I don't want to find myself rushing to try and get, car mount stuff, and do every car mount scene in one day, which is what they would do on any other movie. Mm-hmm. Instead, like, we'll just go up when we go up. So, like, but I also was able to go and do like a couple of those days we're just going down and getting one shot. But that's the shot that helps expand the scope, mm-hmm. but it's the shot you cut in a normal production.
Right, because you don't have the time. It's very smart.
Have the time.
It's extremely smart. A lot of the stuff that you're talking about is what I just went through with my first feature with Meg. Right. It's just like I had to just go out there and like, hey, let's just go do it and spread it out. And I had days. It was all about time, having as much time as I could with the actors and locate. Yeah, it's wonderful to hear somebody else talking about this besides myself.
Yeah, listen, a part of it too is just figuring out what works for you.
That's true too. Yeah, it's what's your flavor? What's your process?
Yeah, there are some people that can deliver a movie in 12 days, 3 takes per scene, with really, really great stuff. That's not really me, mm-hmm. And so it's hard to go and say, well, I need 100 days. But like, arguably, I probably need 100 days and $100 million to really execute a lot of this stuff, like in the way that I would want to. Because it's like, it's weird. It's like you either need so little money that you have none, and it's like you're just completely free, or you need so much money that you can buy that freedom.
We're all at the end of the day, I think all directors are aiming towards the freedom that Kubrick had.
Yeah.
With a studio behind you, and you can do whatever you want. But a lot of people don't understand specifically about Kubrick is that they hear about these long, because he had some of the longest. He has actually the world record for the longest film schedule with Eyes Wide Shut. But the thing is, he has 10 people on crew.
Yeah,
that's it. He's like, I'm just gonna keep. Why are you here? If you're not helping me, anything, get out. And that's how he got all those days. He was never. He was rarely over budget. That's the funny thing. They think of him as a recluse, but he wasn't. He was actually always on budget. I think he went a little bit over budget on Eyes Wide Shut, but generally speaking, he was always on budget and just did his thing. But I think we're all aiming there. That's what I would like.
Well, and it's sort of, it has to get there, because people just aren't giving you that money. Studios aren't giving you that money anymore,
No.
And so, so it's an interesting thing that I've been flirting with and trying out, and sort of taking jobs like Be Somebody sort of allow me to sort of see how, okay, this is how this works. Mm-hmm. Here's how I'd change it. Here's how I would adjust this. And so, you only have so much power in a for-hire situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's hard for people to sort of understand and trust it, because you're saying you need to kind of give me the money and let me go away and make this. And people don't want to do that.
Unless you have a hell of a resume.
Or you're just coming in. I mean, if I come in with a project and I wrote the script and I'm directing it and I'm going to produce it, I can kind of say, listen, I'll take less than what you would normally give for this, but you need to let me just go and do my thing. Gotcha.
And you got to trust me. You got to trust me that it'll get done. With Layover, which is interesting, you have a $6,000 movie. What came of it as far as your career, as far as festivals, as far as distribution? How did that hope? Because a lot of people listening can make a $6,000 film. So I'd love to hear the story of where that actually went to and what it actually did for you.
Yeah. So we finished it, and we were very fortunate. Both Travis, who is a longtime friend and writing partner of mine, produced it, and we're both from Seattle. Mm-hmm. So we have a friend at the Seattle International Film Festival who had sort of heard about us making the movie because we'd been tweeting about it and things like that. And he was like, listen, I'd love to see it when it's done. So we sent it to him. His name's Brad up there. And he runs the Catalyst program. And he watched it and really, really loved it. And, he'd seen a non-finished cut, but he really loved it and he wanted to program it. And we were like, listen, when we made the movie, we had no illusions about it's going to get us into, it's going to get into Sundance, and we're going to be, it's again, what you said, it's this kind of huge thing that's going to blow you up. I was like, no, but I do think it might be a festival movie because we're talking about it being a French language thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, so they offered it to us, the premiere, world premiere there, and we took it. We thought that being a little bit of a bigger fish in a smaller pond would be good. Mm-hmm. Being in our hometown would be good in terms of getting sellouts and things like that. And we really loved the idea of premiering our first feature at our hometown festival. Mm-hmm. And so it went really well. We had 2 sold out shows. We were nominated for their Five Prix award there, which is their sort of prestigious independent award, and we didn't win, but it premiered there. And then I managed to get David Chen of Slash Film to come and see it because he lives in Seattle, and I said, listen, I've got this, you don't know me, but I've got this film. I know you're going to the festival. I'd love to invite you and have you see it. And he came and tweeted out some very nice things about it and then interviewed me afterwards. And that was kind of the first notion of the idea of it being us putting it out there that it was a $6,000 movie. Mm-hmm. And people started to not believe it, and so we started writing articles and we did a whole we had a couple articles come out about the sort of process. We had something on No Film School, and that sort of got us a little bit of attention. And then we got the usual aggregators saying, "Hey, we'll put your movie up and not pay anything." Mm-hmm. And we were like, "Well, let's wait and see." And so actually, David ended up coming on board as a producer. He ended up helping sort of provide some finishing funds for the film, and promoting it and sort of getting it out there. And we basically went through a couple more film festivals, not a lot, kind of once you give away your world premiere, unless you're a huge movie, people aren't really going to play it. Although some people Some people will. It's hard to know. I thought it was going to play in more festivals than it did. And we started aiming for a fall 2014. And so this was May of 2014. So then we decided to start aiming for a fall 2014 self-release. We decided, let's not do this aggregation thing because we're never going to make a dime off of it. And let's experiment. Again, like the nature of the film is to try things and experiment. So let's experiment with self-distribution and try that out and see if it's possible. And so David was also very intrigued by that. And so we ended up setting up our film on Gumroad because they were like one of the cheaper, like they took less in terms of their costs, and built a website and put it up and started selling it and put it up on Vimeo. And, David posted a couple articles about it. And then as a result of that, we ended up getting a guy out of Canada who agreed to sort of do additional distribution, and he ended up, he put it on iTunes, Amazon, that kind of thing. And we kind of reached a point where we were like hitting our limit in terms of sales. So we were like, yeah, if somebody else wants to fund the cost of putting it up, like we feel like we've kind of made our money. But it would be beneficial just to get it out there.
Was it was it profitable at that point?
No. Well, it might have at this point, but it's made probably, last I checked, it's made about 5 of its $6,000 budget.
Okay.
But here's the thing, like, here's what we learned from that, right? Like, we have no stars in it, we have, it's a very French, it's French language, it's indie drama. And we kind of recognized, like, there's a limit to the sort of circle of discussion about that extends out of you, right? There's a limit to your reach. And we kind of realized, okay, like, there's a limit to this reach. And it never really took off. In terms of the public, sort of consumption of it. But we were kind of always okay with that because we had made a feature, and we had made a feature that played in a really reputable film festival, was getting attention, and we were writing about it, and people were intrigued by the $6,000 thing. And I started getting meetings off of it. And then I got, basically ended up getting the last 3 jobs I've had, came directly out of Layover.
Really? So that was just because did people in the industry reach out to you?
Yeah, I mean, they just had heard about it or saw it, or my manager was pitching me, or sending it out to people. I mean, listen, like, the thing about Hollywood is while everyone's making Transformers movies, everyone came out to Hollywood to make The Godfather,
Right.
Well, for the most part. But creative execs really they love a lot of different stuff, and they're always looking for different things. And so the sort of idea of this low budget French language film made by a director that doesn't speak French became very intriguing. And movie on top of that, they were like kind of always amazed at what I could do for the budget. That's sort of become the thing that I'm trying to now get out of. But it was always like,
that's the cheap guy. He could do things with no
that's
money.
the cheap guy. He can do it. But it was more than that, because I think, like, they've seen obviously a lot of cheap movies, and I think that it was really sort of just the right. It just works. I think the movie just ends up working.
Got it. Now,
that's the thing that I also talk about is, like, listen, like, if you want to go out and hunt down, $4 million to make your first feature, like, by all means, like, go ahead. You'll probably do well off of it. But, like, you can still do well. I mean, you should have you should have an agent, you should have a manager. They got to be able to, somebody's got to be able to push you. But, like, it's possible to create a career out of doing something for $6,000 that isn't some massive Sundance hit, like Clerks or something like that.
Now, what's your approach when you are working with actors?
At this point, it's hire the best actors that I can and kind of stay out of their way. Which sounds really simple, but what I do is what I try to do is get it into the text of the script. Like, if it's not in the script, it's not going to be on screen. So, like, get it into the text of the script. And then what I do is I try to get the best actors that I can, whether those are friends or whether they're whatever. And what I try to do is also adjust the role to their sensibilities. So I don't ask the actors to do, if they're not capable of doing big emotional crying scenes, I don't ask them to do big emotional crying scenes. It really is about limiting the role to what they do best, because if they do that and do it really well, no one's going to miss it, right? The biggest trick to movies is people don't miss what's not in a movie.
Right.
if you don't, but what they do, sort of what they'll cringe at or what they'll scoff at or what they'll roll their eyes at are the things that you put in the movie that you really couldn't afford to do well. Right? Like, don't do a car chase if you can't really do a car chase. Do a foot chase. Because if you do a car chase and do it poorly, people are going to see that. But if you do a foot chase and do it really well, people aren't going to go, oh, that was probably a car chase that they switched.
Right. No, they're going to say that's a cool.
So it's sort of, so it's same thing with actors. Like, you have to understand the sort of, until you're in a place where you can hire whoever you want and they're all very, very talented, you have to understand sort of those limitations. But if you can create those limitations in the character, then the actor can do what they do best. And you're not asking them to do something that they don't do very well. And so I sort of figured that out. We tailor the role to them. And then we sit down and we do a lot of talking. We do a lot of talking about the character and throughout the script. And this is where she's coming from. And this is who she is. And then if I can do any kind of like sort of real life training, like when we were with Katya on Negative, she plays a spy. So we did a lot of like, real steel gun training. We did a lot of like, I have a guy who's a former British SAS officer who does like conceal and carry training. And so we did a lot of like on the range gun training with her. We did like, sort of some airsoft style training as well with like, former Army Rangers and things like that. So you're not using real steel, but it's still like you're holding a fairly realistic weapon and you're doing, room clearance and all this stuff, because like what I didn't want her to do on set was think about how she was holding the gun. What I wanted her to do was behave, and just the gun was second nature. And so we do training in that way if we can. And then really once we get to set, it's about, we've done all that work. We've done all the work of the character. And then it's about just fine tuning, right? Like, oh, try this line. You need to be a little angrier here. You need, but it's usually like not a lot of talking to actors. It's not a lot of discussion on set. It's not a lot of like, here's your motivation, which is like the cliche. It really is like, just fine tuning what they already know, but also setting up an environment where you're not limiting them, right? Like you're not saying you got to hit this mark, because if you don't, then you're not in the light and the shot is screwed up. You're trying to get them out of thinking about the movie aspect and more thinking purely from a character basis. So I set up the set and the way we shoot. I do a lot of handheld. I adjust to them. So if they aren't on their mark, I'll move. Like I do a lot of these kind of things where what I try to do is like create the behavior and the blocking of what they're doing, and then I shoot around them. I try to avoid asking them to adjust for camera, and I try to adjust the camera for them. It's not always the case, but like for the most part, I like to do takes where it's a lot of discovery and they're doing what they do and I'm just capturing it. And then we go in and sort of like, scalpel certain things where I'm like, I just need this angle in this position, or I need this. And then but they've already done the bulk of it, and so, and letting them do their thing, like try not to get in the way too much.
It's kind of like what I say is, you're there to capture the lightning. Yeah. In a lot of ways.
And that just has come from me developing that approach over the years of doing a lot of prep. So I know the character, they know the character, it's all in the prep. But like the idea of like, oh, here's some action verbs, or, oh, like pretend there's a stone in your shoe, or like, oh, try and get her to smile. Like, I don't really do any of that. Like I'm not really, it doesn't really work for me. And I prefer what I try to do is just get to as realistic a situation on set as possible.
And then hiring actors who are close to the characters that they can play. Like you say, their limitations are the limitations of the of the character in a lot of ways. And
that's really if you're working with, they haven't been on shows. They don't have as much experience. They don't have as much like, talent, because a lot of times you're starting out, you don't have, unless you're in LA and you just know a bunch of actors, like a lot of times you don't have like, access in the same way that you do, as you build yourself up and you do more. And so in that way you kind of want to limit it. But once you also get to a point where like the actors, it's their job.
Yeah, it's Meryl. Meryl Streep's going to come in and do what she does.
Yeah,
she like
you're not directing Meryl Streep. You're just kind of like, you hire Meryl Streep and then you let her do her thing,
Right.
So it's sort of that prospect. And I think it's trying to create, and this is something that now it's like kind of also on set, it's like doing a lot of like real environments. Like, again, like even for Negative, we didn't permit most of Negative. We kind of just stole it. but we
So
stole
so
these kind of
so
live environments. You know?
so tell us a little bit about. First of all, tell us a little bit about negative, and then also the concept of stealing a shot, because I know a lot of people don't understand what that might mean. So if you can explain the concept of stealing the shot and what are some of those tricks that you don't get caught.
Right. So I'll start with negative. So negative is the story of basically it's the story of this guy. His name's Hollis, who's he's like an amateur, slightly professional photographer, a bit of a hipster, and he's out one day taking photos, and he snaps a photo of this woman. And next thing you know, he's back at his place developing the 35 millimeter film, and there's a knock on his door, and she shows up, and she demands the negative, demands the photo, and before she takes it by force, but before she can leave, men with guns show up, and so she escapes with him, gets him to come with her. And they have to essentially escape out of LA. You come to find out that she's a former British spy who was trying to negotiate a retirement deal with a cartel when things went wrong, and now they want her dead. And because of his involvement with taking her photo and whatever, he's involved as well. And so they basically have to escape from LA to Phoenix to meet up with a former contact of hers and figure out what the next steps are. And so it's a bit of a spy movie, bit of a road movie. It's a thriller. It's a lot of fun. It's really it's cool. It was written by Adam Gaines, who's like this fantastic writer with really great ear for dialogue, and Katya Winter and Simon Quarterman from Westworld, isn't it?
And Katya's from where?
She was in Sleepy Hollow.
Oh, very cool.
And she's also been on Dexter.
Uh-huh.
And so she's been around. She's done a few things. And so Mar Vista financed it and produced it, along with myself and Will Borthwick, who was my producer on it. And it was one of the, I DP'd it. And it was one of these things where what I wanted to do was I wanted Mar Vista to give me money and leave me alone and I'm going to go make this movie the way that I wanted to make it. So that's what we did. We basically, like I said, we shot for 38 days over the course of 6 months. We have gunfights in it. We have a really awesome fight scene. We have a lot of travel. We go from LA to Phoenix. We did a road trip to shoot a bunch of stuff on the road. We shot a bunch of stuff up in the desert. And I was, as a DP, was, in addition to being a director and the camera operator, was basically trying to collapse the conversation, because I was like, I think that I need to try and do this my way in terms of like the visuals, and see if I can take the Layover approach and apply it to something with a bigger canvas, and see if that can work. And I think it absolutely worked. So it was a really great thing. And we're just now in the process of searching for film festivals, like somewhere where we can premiere it, and then and then we'll Mar Vista will put it out and release it probably sometime next year.
No, that's really interesting about Mar Vista, because this movie doesn't sound like generally when a distributor or a production company like Mar Vista or that caliber, they're generally looking for some sort of star power that's going to be able to sell overseas and things like that, which what you're telling me basically goes against convention in a lot of ways, because it's not a genre movie, and either it's not a horror movie, it's not. Unless there's a lot of nudity in it, which I don't think there is.
No,
I'm thinking. I got my dirty AFM hat on,
right,
which is unfortunate.
Well,
I'm just curious about how that came to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, Mar Vista had been a fan since Layover, and their thing is they do sort of their lifetime. They make a lot of money doing those kind of movies, but they've started really looking for under $1 million. Grittier film festival style movies, right? Like things that are very much against what they've been doing, that like might, play festivals and win some awards and get some attention in a different way, but make them low budget enough that they're not taking huge risks. It's not like a huge gamble for them. And I think they were kind of intrigued. I mean, they really liked the script. They liked the package. I was about to make it no matter what. I was about to maybe even self-fund it. And Mar Vista came in and they were really intrigued by not only sort of the package, but also just, how much we were going to make it for, which I can't talk about, unfortunately, but also the way in which we were going to make it. And I think that there was like, the idea was, give us enough money to make this, but not so much that you really care. And then let us go make it and let us bring it back to you. And it was really me also talking to them and saying, listen, like, I need to make this my way. Like, I just come off doing a project that like I was not happy with because I didn't have control over it. And I need creative control. not Final Cut, but I need creative control to execute this the way that I want to execute it. And they were very, very generous in allowing me to go do that, and very supportive of that process. So, I think that they have a sense of what they can make off of it, and they know that whatever they gave us budget-wise is much less than
what they can make.
So,
obviously, so that's how that works.
Yeah.
Now,
I think they're stoked on it, though. They really like it.
Now, as far as stealing shots, can you talk a little bit about tricks that you've learned along the way on how to steal shots, what to do, and what is stealing a shot specifically?
Well, listen, when I talk about stealing a shot, I'm not talking about stealing a shot with a bunch of trucks and gear and equipment and crew and all this stuff, right? Like, if you're going that route, you need a permit, because that's what police care about. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that's become really interesting with this whole YouTube thing and iPhones and all this stuff is the really proliferation of people shooting stuff, right? People are shooting stuff, especially in LA, all over the place. And it would be a police officer's full-time job to sort of police that. So they don't really care. As long as you're not blocking sidewalks, as long as you're not impacting pedestrians, as long as you're not, sort of like creating a headache for traffic or doing anything dangerous, they're not really going to pay attention to you, especially if you're a limited crew. If you're like under 3 people, they don't really care either. So that gets you around sort of the law thing, the permit thing. And again, like, check with your lawyers, do your due diligence, like, don't take my word for it. But this is in my experience, because a permit only gives you really permission for that moment when an officer shows up and says, do you have permission to be shooting here? Mm-hmm. That's it. It's not something you need for distribution. It's not something you have to prove later. Like, it's literally just a document that's good for like the day that it's dated. Mm-hmm. And so, that gives you a lot of opportunity to sort of steal stuff. Now, stealing a shot basically means not paying money for it, and not permitting it. Mm-hmm. And so there's, a lot of sort of looseness in that, but really it's getting the shots without people sort of stopping you. And the fact is, I've never really been stopped, because I move so fast. So like, one of the things about like Layover is Layover, again, opens on an airplane flying above Los Angeles. We're on a real plane, and we land at LAX, and we walk through the airport, and we get on a shuttle, and we go to a hotel, and all that's in the movie. None of it is permitted. None of it was paid for. Well, you actually
you shot in the airport?
Yeah.
How did you shoot in the airport? You just walked in?
So we just walked through, and we got one take. And, I had a 5D kind of like pressed against my chest right behind my actress. And we sort of just walked, and I shot it all documentary style, knowing that I would cut it up later. And that's the secret. Like, you can't do it where you have multiple takes and important performances and certain lines you got to nail. And you can't do any of that. If you're stealing a shot, you need to kind of steal a shot like that you can shoot kind of doc style. So that might not fit into like somebody's style of shooting. It works in mine. But, we shot in Union Station, but we do all these as like kind of walkthroughs. So they show up as like seconds, they show up as like these short things, these interludes, these in-betweens, and we basically, but that gives so much scope to it. That gives such a big
if you're shooting at Union Station, I mean, I guess if you walk in with a small enough camera and you're not making a big deal of it, and you're just shooting with natural light, and you're just following somebody or getting someone sitting down.
Yeah, and you're just walking through, like, they don't even know to stop you. They're not looking for that.
Right.
They're looking for like shoulder cameras and like whatever. And so, I shot negative with the C100 Mark II. And which is a fairly small compact camera. And so like, by keeping it sort of close to my chest and like having the monitor where I could kind of just look down and see it and just walking, like, I chose a style that benefited from that approach,
and that's also,
I didn't choose one. It's like, it is my style.
And it is a compact camera, but it's definitely not a DSLR camera. So it does have a little bit of a footprint to it. Yeah. So you got to be a little slick with that.
But nowadays these cameras, they have autofocus. That's fantastic. You can get away with like so much because these cameras are really small. They're compact. They're light. It's just really like, it's if you're stealing it, like, we shot a whole chase sequence through this Chinese market in Chinatown. Right. And the way we did it was just walking through it. Like, we just walked through it, and I'd stop and I'd go, okay, wait, stop. And then I'd get to the front shot, and I'd do like a walking backwards thing for like 20 feet. And then we turn around and do a side shot. Like, we would just move through it. And I knew that I was just going to chop it up so much, and the geography was not going to like be, not have a continuity to it. So it didn't matter. And I could just like, I could just cut. And so that's very different than going out and shooting a dialogue scene where you know you need to do multiple takes, you're trying to get performance. You don't want anybody bothering you. And so for negative, what we did for a lot of those was we were out in the desert. We just went up to Palmdale and found like these tracts of land that, I've shot on before, and we would just go shoot, and nobody bothered us because nobody cares.
Yeah, I just went to one of the scenes in my movie. I went to the Hollywood sign, and I was nervous because I'm like, oh man. But halfway up, I figured out, I'm like, there's no one coming up here. I'm exhausted. No, by the time someone calls somebody, it's over.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty eye-opening, and it gave a lot of scope to the movie. Yeah.
And again, people, I think in LA, they kind of give you the benefit of the doubt. Like they kind of assume like YouTubers are shooting all the time. With Layover was interesting because the other thing about shooting with the DSLR is people don't assume you're shooting a movie.
Right.
People's perception, this is what it really boils down to. People's perception, although it's changing, but people's perception of making a movie is not one guy with a small, tiny camera.
Right.
It's sound guys and lights and trucks and a lot of people and a big camera. And so that's what they assume making a movie is. I mean, when we were shooting in the airport, we had people sort of being like, oh, like, what are you shooting? I thought people were going to flag me thinking I was taking photos, but I was also not taking photos of I didn't try to shoot the security area. Like I wasn't an idiot. I just looked like the actress I was with. We just looked like travelers,
So it was just you and her. It was just you and her.
Just me and her. Yeah.
Done.
We bought 2 tickets to San Francisco, and we went to the airport early and shot the end of the movie, and then we waited and we flew up to San Francisco, and when we flew back, we shot on the plane coming into LA, and and then we shot on our way out, and you just kind of it just looked like we were taking photos. And so people just don't know, and they don't assume that you're making a movie. They assume our cover was going to be, oh, well, we're just travel vloggers. And if people were like, well, you can't shoot, I'd be like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
It
wasn't we even tested it. We went and did a test shoot, and we went to the baggage claim area at LAX and shot with the camera and shot a couple things, and nobody paid attention to us.
Wow. Really interesting. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
But there's only certain things you can do. I'm not going to attempt to do a scene where somebody's holding a gun in public.
That's just foolish. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just foolish. So it's so what it is it comes back to your script, right? It comes back to what you talked about, which is adjusting your script for the budget you have. And basically it's creating a modular script. So what you're doing is you're creating a script with scenes that can kind of be shot anywhere. And in Layover, and I reference Layover is easier because people can actually watch it, but Layover, there's a club scene. And I knew I was never going to be able to afford to do a club scene because I've done music videos and I know it costs so much money.
So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So I was prepared. I was like, okay, I know people in the club scene. Maybe I can come in with them and bring a camera like I'm a photographer, and then we'll shoot the scenes. Or maybe I'll buy a table for part of the budget for $300-400, and I'll bring my iPhone and we'll just shoot on the iPhone. Right. But the whole premise of this in terms of how we executed it was all done because in the script, I was like, I'm never going to get a club that I own to shoot this scene. So I need to write a scene that has limited action, no dialogue, and does not require me to do repeat performances. Because if I have to steal this in order to get the size of us being in a big club, I can't afford to have people go why do you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? So I didn't. So I designed it to be kind of documentary. The point of the club scene in Layover is her letting go. She's taking ecstasy. She's letting go. She's having a fun night. And that's what that scene really needs to reflect. And then there's a small bit of action. Now, we ended up getting permission to come into an existing club that was open, and we were allowed to be in there for an hour with our cameras. So we were able to shoot a lot of that stuff. But it was designed to be done in a way that did not require a lot of effort production-wise. And that's part of it. Right? Just being smart about it. Again, the airport, not shooting stuff that requires narrative, not shooting, the narrative is she flies into LAX, she gets off the plane, she walks to the airport, she gets on a shuttle, goes to the hotel. That's all you need to know. And I can roll a lot of it because all I'm looking for is a little piece that I can edit.
Well, I mean, it's perfect. You're basically saying the same thing that Mark and Michael did, Polish did for Lovers Only.
Yeah,
they went over to France and shot in every cathedral, every place they wanted to, because they were
Yeah.
shooting with a DSLR, and they happened to have a star in it with Stana that helped the selling of it. But
Yeah.
but they, on a
Well,
production standpoint, that's what they did.
listen, like if we got kicked out of the church, then we'd shoot the scene in a cafe.
Right.
You know,
You got to
And
be able
that's
to
the
flow with
modular,
it.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you got to
like-
flow.
yeah, exactly. You got to be you know. So you design a script to be done like that. Like I always say, you know, don't be specific about things. Like don't be specific about the house. It's a house. It could be a small house, a big house. It really doesn't matter, because once you write in a way in which it matters, then there's only one way you can do that. You know, there's only one house that you can get, and that's going to cost you money.
And that's money.
You know, like, and if your uncle, by the way, has a Ferrari dealership and he's going to loan you a Ferrari, great, write the Ferrari in. Awesome. You know, but don't write in a Ferrari knowing you can't get it without paying for it. And so,
exactly.
yeah, that's the kind of thing. And also, like, you know, and I ran into this on South Beach because, you know, I came into South Beach. South Beach was my first job after Layover. And it was certainly a massively, not massive, but it was a much, much bigger budget than I had on Layover.
Mm-hmm.
Although pretty much any budget's bigger than what I had on Layover.
Right.
But, you know, it wasn't a lot. And so what I sat down with them because they were like, well, these locations are costing more money than we expected, da-da-da-da-da. And I said, listen, you guys have written a TV series or a Hulu series, but you've written a story that's entirely about rich people. Like everyone in this story is rich. And so, you know, and you've set up expectations for an audience, right? Like you've got Samantha, who's a club owner of the hottest club in South Beach. You've got her dad, who runs the hottest record label in Miami, right? These are people who require the look of success in your show, or nobody's going to buy it. So suddenly you can't give this high-powered record label owner a corner office in a basement. You know, you can't do it. You got to give them something with views. So that stuff, you know, you can't have 20 extras in a club. That's the hottest club in South Beach.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need 300-400 people to fill this thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I'm like, that's your problem. The problem isn't like it's costing you money. The problem is you wrote a script that's cost you money. You know, there's only so much I can fake. You know, I can fake nice clothes. You know, I can't fake
300 people
club.
Right.
Yeah.
There's only so much computers can do.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So, but that's the thing is like, you know, don't write scripts about rich people. You know, like you're not going to be able to afford just to fund the creative that's required to make them look the part. And then you're in that whole, like, you know, middle school thing where like you're playing, you know, you're shooting your brothers playing gangsters and cops and they're 12 years old. You know, that's where you get into. And so the thing for me is that I've said this before, and like, I'm really allergic to cheapness as a director.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will make any adjustment I can to make it not feel cheap, because if it feels cheap, your audience is just going to sense that too. And they're going to turn off, because it's, again, going back to like the chase scene, right? Like the Fast series has cornered the market on chase scenes. Like, so unless your chase scene is so outstanding and so different and so unique and achievable with whatever money you have, why are you bothering?
Don't bother.
Because everybody's going to compare it to that.
Right.
You know? And so find a way to be different, because trust me, like, I've had the experience on stuff I produced and stuff I've been involved with, not as a director, fortunately, but on other things, where you write a chase sequence and it just gets cut and cut and cut. And all of a sudden you're in a loop-de-loop, you know, in a warehouse that is not very exciting, you know, and everybody sees, wow, that was a really rinky-dink chase sequence that clearly they had no money. I never want people to say, wow, you clearly had no money. I will do everything I can to not put in the idea into my audience's heads that I had no money to pull off what I wanted to pull off. I hate this idea of, let's take $1 million and make it look like 20 million.
Right.
Like, take $1 million and make it look like, you know, like, don't reach for a $20 million thing. Do the $1 million version really, really, really well. You know, like, do an outstanding foot chase, do an outstanding fight scene. Like, because you can afford those things, but you can't afford, you know, to blow up an airplane as a car flies out of it. Like, you're going to do that visually on your own home computer. It's going to look like crap.
And that was the funny thing is on Swingers, Doug Liman actually said, instead of us trying to make the $1 million movie, which I think they had like, I think $500,000 or something like that to make that movie, or 300,000, something like that. Instead of trying to make the $300,000 we've got look like $1 million or $2 million, let's make the $300,000 movie look like a $20,000 movie, but let's just blow open the scope. And that's what they did. And it worked perfect, because you look at that movie and you don't go, oh, that looks like a $3, $4, $5 million movie. No, it looks like what it is. But they were able to travel to Las Vegas and do all this stuff.
They're all over the place.
Yeah, they would have never been able to do if they were trying to push that production value up to a $30 million.
That's what we did on Layover. Layover is nighttime. It's all shot at night. We're on motorcycles. We're traveling through the city. It's shot on a 5D. It's not like, it's almost entirely handheld. Like the lights are sort of blown out. It's not like perfectly lit, like, but there's a beauty to it and there's an experience to it. And what I've kind of gotten to, that I'm a place where I'm very, very excited about, is this idea of like, you are following along on this. Mm-hmm. You don't feel like it's staged. That's the feeling that I now as a director am interested in trying to get on film and trying to create for the audience, is this idea of like, is this real? Mm-hmm. Like, because it feels like this is a documentary, but I know it's not.
I got you. So I got 3 last questions I ask all of my guests.
Cool.
What is the advice you would give a filmmaker just starting out in the business?
Get yourself a camera. Whatever that camera is, don't worry about how good it is, and find and start shooting. And some of the best advice that I saw was, funny enough, and you might have been on this, not this thread, but like on the board. But remember the IMDb like message boards?
Of course.
Like with all the like filmmakers, and there were some like a couple guys on there that were clearly like hot shots, and they were like making like some direct to DVD movie.
Right.
But the best thing that I saw was, get yourself a camera, find some plays, short plays, Edward Albee, The Zoo, whatever. Mm-hmm. Get a couple people together and start shooting, and get some editing software and try to put it together, and learn from that, and see how you messed up, and see what doesn't work, and see how you cross the line. But really, like, I think that you can read about it, you can study up on it, you can do it, but you got to get out and you got to do it. You got to see what works for you. So like, I really don't think there's a substitute for like doing it. And nowadays, if it's an iPhone, if it's using that, like, what's that, it shoot like 2K or 4K on the iPhone, that they shot Tangerine on. Yeah. Like, whatever it is, like there's, you don't really have an excuse anymore, and don't worry what's going to happen with it. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
Right now, your goal is to just make things, put them together, see how it works, see what didn't, and then make it again.
Don't be precious. Don't be precious.
There's plenty of time to be precious later. You got to earn. You got to earn it.
You got to earn. Yeah, exactly. As opposed to, I know so many filmmakers that make their first feature and they are on it for 3 years.
Yeah.
And just on it for 3, as opposed to just keep going. They just are on it for 3 years. What's the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Okay, I don't have one that took me the longest to learn, but it's something that it takes people a long time to learn. Mm-hmm. And that is, nobody's going to do it for you.
Yeah.
So I learned very quickly after I won my MTV Movie Award, and nobody saw the awards and nobody cared, that I was not God's gift to filmmaking and not the second coming of Paul Thomas Anderson.
Right.
I won this award and really thought like, oh, the doors are open. I know it's an MTV Movie Award, but like, who's a student filmmaker that wins an MTV Movie Award, right? It just didn't happen that way. Right. And the doors didn't open, and I didn't, get agents calling me, and I wasn't making my first feature at 23. It took me a couple of years to really, go, okay, nobody's going to do this for me. So if I'm going to make it happen, I've got to start hustling. And that's one of the best lessons that I've learned. And I was fortunate that I actually learned it early on, rather than 10 years of sort of bitterness waiting for people to read my scripts and give me a shot, even though I hadn't really earned the right to do that.
I'm that bitter guy. It took me a little longer to figure that out, my friend.
Well, there's a lesson for you. You can take that and
Yeah, no, it's the truth.
Do the work.
I was waiting around. I wasn't waiting around for people to do stuff, but I was like, I wrote scripts, tried to get the money.
Yeah, man.
Shot a short. Shot a short. That short's gonna blow me up because when I did Broken did open a lot of doors for me.
Right.
I got I didn't get deals, but I got a lot of meetings, a lot of stuff, but I didn't have anything ready. I had no script. I had no nothing. And I lived in the East Coast at the time, so it was like, it was really a waste. All that attention was a waste.
It's so easy when you have, because I feel the same way. It's so easy at a younger age when you have something like that happen, right? Like, oh, these people want to meet with me, or oh, I won this award. Like, unless it's literally like an Oscar or like Sundance. Even then. Yeah. But at least you could say you won Sundance or an Oscar. Yeah. But it's that thing of it's all just like, it's all talk. It's just all talk. Even now, I'm just like, I'm telling my agents, I'm just like, we got to stop it with the generals because like they're a waste of time for me. Like I'm tired of these. Like, let's go in when I have something, but like to say like, oh, this is mine. Like let them watch my stuff and let's go.
Yeah, let me general meetings. Like, hey, I just want to come over there and like have meet and greet.
Right, because the idea is it feels like something's happening when nothing is happening.
That's what that's what this town is built on.
Yeah, and it's distorting. And you can get really lost in it, and you can be waiting around saying, "Oh, they're going to read my script," and the fact is, your script's probably not that great, And like, you got to create opportunities for yourself. Like that's what it really is. Like we're in an age where, whatever system was in place in the '90s, where like filmmakers could come out of Sundance and like blow up and do big features. It's not that anymore. Like people are looking to YouTube, and there's also no excuse now. Like you have such an opportunity with like the cheapness of shooting, editing, sound, equipment. But not only that, now you have distribution. That's what's really cool and different about this world. Whether it's indie film, whether it's YouTube, whether it's whatever, is like, I mean, for $2,000, you can pay to have your movie on iTunes, Amazon, Vudu, like whatever, any of those. You can pay up front to make that happen.
Yeah.
If you have that money.
Yeah, use something like Distributor.
Yeah, like Distributor or something like that. And so that was never available before. You were making a movie and spending whatever money you were spending,
you're rolling the
hoping
dice.
that somebody else would do it. Now that's not the case. And the fact is like, yes, there's so many people now on YouTube and it's like saturated and it's like a saturated market. But like, I think that what I've seen is like good content still breaks through. And if you can get somebody like an agent or a manager that can help push through into the Hollywood area. Because listen, people in Hollywood are not watching YouTube all day. They're being told who's on YouTube and earning a lot of money, and then they watch them. And so, and also like, think about this too. Like a lot of people make movies like, for fans, like, or for an audience. Maybe your first couple of movies should be made for the industry, right? Like what movies would an industry, like an exec like to watch? What would he enjoy? Because then he goes, I really like this guy. Let's get him to make this movie. That's what happened with Layover. Layover didn't find a massive audience in terms of the public because it's America, and who's watching any movie with subtitles.
That's what I find so fascinating about Layovers, because it's so not El Mariachi. It's so
as far away from it as you can
or
get.
Clerks or any of those kind of movies. It's a foreign film shot in L.A. by a non-foreign director. Yeah, it's like if someone would tell me like this is going to be my first feature and I think I'm going to be able to get work off of this in L.A., I'll go, you're nuts.
Yeah, for sure.
You're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. So,
I never thought it was going to lead to what it led to, but it's this idea of like you said, the pitch sounds so intriguing. You're like, I got to watch this. And then it's at least good. If it were terrible, you'd be like, oh, forget it. But like people seem to really connect with it in some way. Cause it's about, it goes back to like Layover is about a choice. Layover is about coming to a fork in the road and trying to figure out which direction to take. And everybody has been in that position.
Amen. Now, what are 3 of your favorite films of all time?
All time is The Insider.
Okay.
By Michael Mann.
Yep. Good film.
Second favorite film of all time is Traffic.
Good film.
And I would say my third favorite film of all time is Casablanca.
Nice. I always find it fascinating to ask that question because it really gives me a good idea of the sensibilities, especially when I'm talking to a director or a writer. Their sensibilities in those 3 movies pretty much says a lot about your sensibilities.
I mean, Casablanca is a huge outlier, but it's just such a perfect film.
It is.
Like, it's an unbelievably perfect film. It's one of those things that I just like, I can put on any time and just enjoy it. And I can watch it as many times as possible. But
and Soderbergh, I mean, Traffic is a genius work.
Traffic blew my mind. I saw it like 5 times in the theater.
Yeah, but also Soderbergh is one of those directors that doesn't get as much credit as he should. Man has done some amazing Out of Sight.
Yeah, like, Out of Sight. I mean, even the Che,
the Che,
2 movies. Like, his work on The Knick is unbelievable. It's like, I mean, it's funny because I see myself starting to go in that direction, like where I'm DPing and I'm operating and I'm editing and I'm like, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of like the path he took, and it seems to work out for him. But it's this idea of like, you just kind of get to a place where you're wanting to condense all these conversations.
I just DP'd my feature. I edited it. I was the camera op. I was the director. I did pretty much everything on it. Almost everything. I had a 3-man crew on it. And, you're right. You're like, I don't want to have to, I couldn't have had all those people. It would just take too long. And we were able to shoot something from idea to finish in 6 months. Yeah.
There you go.
And you're done. And you're out the door.
And it's all you.
Yeah.
For better or worse. Yeah. That was the thing on Negative, was I was like, listen. But for better or worse, this represents exactly what I want it to be. Whereas before it's sort of like, okay, it's sort of what I want. It's close. Like, the DP is fantastic. I don't really have a complaint about it, but like, I would have done this, or we could have sped this up or been quicker on the lighting with this, and it's, instead of just being like, yeah, I'm going to put 1 light up. I mean, I know I don't know what you are on time, but like this last project that I just did I just shot this project in Mexico City with Canon. And it's called See You Dad. It's a short. It's a short that's like a proof of concept for a feature. And the idea is, we basically went down there and we shot completely without permits. And we shot in these, it's a narrative documentary hybrid. So it's like there's narrative elements where we're doing dialogue and we're doing it French New Wave style, where we're in controlled environments like indoors, restaurants, apartments, whatever. And then we have these kind of like on your street. There's a story of like a photojournalist, who's like covering Mexico City. And so she's basically like, so we shot the narrative stuff like Mark is actually in it. Mark Polish. She came down and was in it.
That's awesome.
And so we actually like shot the documentary stuff. Like, I mean, the narrative stuff, these conversations in these locations that I'd never been to before, I'd never seen. And we did it with basically existing artificial light. Like, I put up like 1 or 2 lights at most in these scenes. And I just shot it like on the Canon C300, I shot at high ISOs. That was a whole part of it, which was like, it was like a live learning exercise for like DPs and students down there to sort of see, no, you can push this camera beyond 3200. I know everyone tells you not to, but you can. And this is what it looks like. And this is what you get, and so you're able to shoot like 5-page dialogue scenes in 4 hours because you're spending 20 minutes lighting. And then you go out on the street and you shoot all of this documentary. Like, we were like basically like Nightcrawler, like we were patrolling around Mexico City trying to find like, action with like cops and things like that. And it was really like life-changing for me because I was able to really prove how you could shoot something cinematic without the use of like anything other than the camera. And so it's created now this sort of approach that like I'm starting to blend into other things I'm doing, which is this kind of like feeling of documentary narrative hybrid. And the thing about the documentary and the thing about stealing shots and the thing about like that aspect of it is you don't know what you're going to get. Right? Like when we were shooting with her, we ran into a police raid with like cops and riot gear. We ran into a semi-truck had crashed into a building and had like destroyed the entire front end of the cab. And then we happened upon a fatal hit and run where we showed up and like, I mean, they were like I have a shot in the movie of them moving the body from like the street to the corner, like van. And it's just like, you could never plan that. And you can never do that without a huge amount of money to stage all that. Right. And yet it works within the narrative because it's about her being in Mexico City shooting this stuff. And so it's really, for me, it's like kind of the new thing, which is like this idea of like Soderbergh does this too. He doesn't light, he builds the lighting into his sets and he puts up 1 or 2 things and that's it. And he just moves. He just moves and shoots really quick and like, but gets a lot of material. And so that's kind of where I want to be, which is this idea of like, let me break open this traditional production model. Let me shoot things a different way. And then all you're doing in talking in terms of the money is expanding the scope of how that's captured. But the idea of blending reality, what is real and what is not, what is in this movie is real and what isn't, and having documentary and narrative footage look exactly the same. Mm-hmm. There's no differentiating between them. Is probably the next sort of frontier of what I'm exploring as a filmmaker.
You know, I think, and I'll end it on this, but I think that what you discuss and what I've discussed in the past about doing our respective films is that you know, a lot of young filmmakers and just indie filmmakers in general, they get caught up in the dogma of filmmaking, what they're told in books, what they're told in schools, that this is the right way of doing it. This is the way it's been done all this time. And it's the few people who said, fuck it, I'm not going to do it that way. I mean, Robert Rodriguez, you know, he did it his way. And, you know, all the guys from the 90s, Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater, you know, all those guys, they did it their way. Soderbergh, I mean, is the poster child for that. And it's really just doing, like Mark Duplass, I mean, seriously, or Joe Swansberg.
Oh, yeah, the Duplass brothers, forget about it.
I mean, the Duplass brothers, Joe Swansberg, Lynn Shelton, all these kind of guys, they're just doing it their way. And, you know, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but I've talked to industry friends of mine who are like either TV directors or film, you know, big time film directors and things like that. And I tell them my process for making Meg, and they just look at you like deer in the headlights. Like they don't get it. They're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm like, yeah, we shot it with, I had 3 people on the crew the entire time. But how did you get, how does it look like that? I'm like, well, exactly. I did this, I did that. I'm the colorist on it and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And they just don't get it. And I find it so invigorating, honestly. I
know. It's like, it's a lot of fun.
It's like, oh, you guys don't know how the sausage is made.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I remember, you know, it's funny because I remember like in Seattle, I was on a panel with all the Catalyst filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And of course you get the question of like, what was the budget on your movie?
Of course.
And you go down the line and everyone was like, I can't tell you. And get to me, I'm like, I'll tell you. It was $6,000. And then like all of a sudden you're the focus of that conversation because they can't talk about what they spent and they probably spent $500,000. And you're suddenly the spotlight's on you because you're like, 1, you can talk about it. And 2, it's such a ridiculous number that everybody wants to hear about it. You know, a part of it too is like, you know, you've done this is like, how do you create a conversation around what you're doing and get people to want to talk to you about it? How do you get execs to go, I understand how you made this movie for $6,000. And then they want to meet with you and then they want to talk about it. And then they want to find a way to like do what you're doing because it's faster, you know? So it's just like, it's a really interesting sort of position to be in and sort of coming from that perspective of like, you know, it's what I said. And I know people who are like this, where like, you know, they don't want to edit themselves. They don't want to shoot themselves. They don't want to take the time to learn, you know, but as a result, they're always going to be reliant on other people to make their films. Right. And if you don't have money, then you're asking favors, and who wants to keep asking favors for the rest of their life? Right. But if you're a guy who can shoot, edit, direct, produce, write, you know, we'll leave off music and sound mixing, but you know, those are like 5 serious roles that you can do yourself. You're never in that position. The only person that's going to not get it done is you. Mm-hmm. You know, you have no excuses. Oh, well, I don't have a DP, so I can't go shoot. Go shoot it. Yeah. You know, like there's nothing stopping you. Just learn how to do it. And then all you need is the camera, and you can get out and you can start creating content. You can start getting out there more and doing it more. But like, you know, in this low budget indie world, if you're always in a position where you need money, you have to have this, you have to have that, then you're going to be doing a lot of waiting. And clearly people have created a career out of that. But like, you know, it doesn't have to be that way.
I mean, and I'll go back to Soderbergh real quick. I mean, you know, he did Sex, Lies, and Videotape, but on the same method, he did Oceans 11, 12, and 13. He lit them himself. I had no idea he lit those himself, and they're gorgeous.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Tim Smith at Canon, who was telling me about how he was helping out Soderbergh on, what was it, Full Frontal, that like weird digital movie. Yeah, back in the day. And he was just like, he's like, you know, we rented out a hotel and he's just on the XL2 or XL1S or whatever, and he's shooting around. It's just like, you know, it was insane. We were shooting so much, and he was just doing it. And he was experimenting, and like, you know, he's like Brad Pitt sleeping on the floor next to me because we're all tired, you know, and And it's that same thing. He did it with Schizopolis, where he just went off and like kind of made his thing and kind of like, and so he's got that experience so that he can back it up and he can, and then what's really great about it is then he's got $100 million that he can play with,
Can you imagine? Yeah, he's like, oh, great.
And do his right thing.
Well, like we can't go to a casino, so we're just going to build one.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what
exactly. Then you have complete control. Like, funny enough, my a very great friend, DP of mine, he does he'll do grip work in New York, to like whatever. But anyway, so he did grip work on a pickup scene in Haywire. Mm-hmm. So this scene where Ewan McGregor and Michael Fassbender are like talking in the pub. I don't know if you've seen the movie.
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, but there's a conversation where they're talking in the pub, right? They're just having this conversation. So that was shot in New York. It was supposed to be somewhere else, but it was shot in New York. So Paul was like, my DP friend, he was like, yeah, so Soderbergh comes in, everything's already set up. He's got his 2 red cameras, he's got 2 monitors, it's already set up for the shot. He's like, they basically shoot the scene, it takes them half a day to shoot this dialogue scene, like that's it. And then they're like getting ready to go, and then somebody says, oh, hey, Steven, in this shot in the mirror, you can see.
Sorry about that. Can you say that one more time? You just broke up.
Oh, I was just saying. So anyway, so right before they were getting ready to break up and pack down, somebody pointed out on the monitor that you could see one of the flags or one of the like frames for the lighting, like in the shot, in the mirror, in the reflection. Mm-hmm. And Soderbergh looks at it and he goes, "Nobody's going to see that." He's like, "That's it." And like, true enough, if you look in the movie, you could see it if you're looking for it. But if you're not looking for it, you'd never know. And it's like, it's just that kind of thing where it's like you know what you can get away with. And if you can do that, then you can shoot faster and you can shoot more and you can shoot better and you can shoot differently. And you can get to a place of doing some really, really cool stuff because, you're not letting stuff worry you.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Amen. Now, where can people find you?
So the best place is Twitter. My handle is at Joshua_Caldwell, Caldwell, or you can go to my website, joshua-caldwell.com, and that'll have news and all that kind of info, and you can just kind of branch out from there.
Very cool, man. Listen, man, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, man. I feel like I found a brother in arms here, man. It's very, very cool.
Well, when I heard about you and saw what you were doing, I was like, all right, this guy's going to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no question, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you for dropping some major knowledge bombs for the tribe, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime.
I told you. I know it's a little bit of a longer episode, but there is a lot of knowledge in that episode. And I wanted to thank Josh for coming on the show and really dropping some major knowledge bombs on the tribe. And again, if you want to check out the links to Layover, see the trailer for Layover so you can really see what a $6,000 movie looks like. From his perspective, head over to indiefilmhustle.com/121 for the show notes and all the links of everything we discussed in this episode. It's an exciting time to be an indie filmmaker, guys. I have to tell you, and coming from a perspective of someone of my vintage, I wish I would have had all of this kind of stuff when I was coming up. I unfortunately did not have that type of technology, nor the amount of knowledge that there is out here. So honestly, there's no excuse at all for you guys not making a feature film a year, if not 2 or 3 a year, and getting them out there, making money with them, and continuing to grow as an artist, as a filmmaker, and as an entrepreneur, building up your filmmaking business. There is no excuse, and I will continue to hopefully prove that in the coming months and years, which is what I'm planning to do with all the features that I've gotten a taste. Since I've gotten a taste now to shoot a feature film, and I'm like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. I'm going to shoot more of them, and I'm going to shoot as many as I can and tell as many great stories as I can and get it out there to the world and build a business, because at the end of the day, guys, it's called show business, and the word business has 4 more letters, double the letters than the word show. So also today's show is sponsored by Masterclass. If you guys want to take some amazing courses online from Werner Herzog, Academy Award-winning Werner Herzog on filmmaking, Aaron Sorkin for screenwriting, Hans Zimmer for film composing, as well as if you're directors or filmmakers, you want to know how actors really act and how they to get inside the head of an actor, you could take 2 classes from Dustin Hoffman and Kevin Spacey. all at Masterclass. So just head over to indiefilmhustle.com/masterclass and check them out. I've been taking those courses now since they've been coming out, and I know they have a bunch of new courses coming out soon for filmmakers, and I'm excited, cannot wait to see what's coming up. So indiefilmhustle.com/masterclass. And also don't forget to head over to freefilmbook.com. That's freefilmbook.com to download your free filmmaking audiobook from Audible. So guys, thanks again. As always, keep the hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.